Good morning, class. We're going to continue with Fahrenheit 451 on page 8. If you recall, the last time we left off, Clarice had asked Montag if he was happy. So Montag begins. Happy? Of all the nonsense! He stopped laughing. He put his hand into the glove hole of his front door and let it know his touch. The front door slid open. Of course I'm happy. What does she think? I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill, something that seemed to peer down at him now. He moved his eyes quickly away. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it save one afternoon a year ago when he had met an old man in the park and they had talked. Montag shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory, astonishing in fact. She had a very thin face, like the dial of a small clock, seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of the night. When you waken to see the time and see the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second, with a white silence and a glowing all certainty in knowing what it has to tell of the night passing swiftly on toward further darkness, but moving also toward a new sun. What? Asked Montag of that other self, the subconscious idiot that ran babbling at times, quite independent of will, habit, and conscience. He glanced back at the wall. How like a mirror, too, her face. Impossible, for how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often, he searched for a simile, found one in his work, torches, blazing away until they whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back to you your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink, and if the muscles of his jaw stretched imperceptibly, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought, now that I think of it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there, in the street, so darned late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon had set. Complete darkness, not a hint at the silver world outside, the windows tightly shut, the chamber of a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink, warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over, and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed on the ceiling by invisible threads of steel and movable, and in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her, wide-eyed, toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the 3rd time. The room was cold, but nevertheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the curtains and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path, even as the foot swung. His foot kicked. The object gave a dull clink and slid off in darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out of the nostrils was so faint it stirred only the furthest fringes of life, a small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. Two moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small handheld fire. Two pale moonstones buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching him. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain, over which clouds might pass, their moving shadows, but he felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps on her tamped shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out of her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came or went or came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed. The small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound, as if two giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seam. Montague was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombs going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them. One and one and one and another and another and another did all the screaming for him. He opened his own mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bared teeth. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hand plunge towards the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece on the phone. Emergency hospital? A terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, and that of the morning the earth would be thought as. He stood shivering in the dark and let his lips go on, moving and moving. They had this machine. They had 2 machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra, down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence with an occasional sound of inner suffocation and blind searching. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw but did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on, anyway. Shove the bore down. Slush up the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought out in the throb of a suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working, too. The other machine was operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-stainable reddish-brown overalls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood and serum. Gotta clean 'em out both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple of 1,000 times, and the brain just gives up, just quits. Stop it, said Montague. I was just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montague. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. That's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right in our suitcase here. It can't get at her now. As I said, you take out the old and put in the new, and you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell. The operator's cigarette moved on his lips. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many starting a few years ago, we had the special machines built. With the optical eyes, of course, that was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need an MD case like this. All you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look, he started for the door. We gotta go. Just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Someone else just jumped off the cap of a pill box. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight-lined mouths, the men with the eyes of puff adders, took up their load of machine and tube, their case of liquid melancholy and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down into a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said, at last. There are too many of us, he thought. There are millions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Half an hour passed. The bloodstream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's flesh and brain and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along to the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed it and reblocked it and brought it back in the morning. If only. He got up, and put back the curtains and opened the windows wide to let the night air in. It was 2:00 in the morning. Was it only an hour ago, Clarice McClellan in the street, and him coming in the dark room, and his foot kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour? But the world had melted down and sprung up in a new colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarice and her father and mother and the uncle who smiled so quietly and so earnestly. Above all, their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way. Coming from the house that was so brightly lit, this late at night, while all the other houses were kept to themselves in darkness, Montag heard the voices talking, giving, talking, weaving, reweaving their hypnotic web. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn without even thinking of it. He stood outside the talking house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead, he stood there, very cold, his face a mask of ice, listening to a man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. "Well, after all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. Blow your nose on a person, wad them, flush them away, reach for another, blow, wad, flush, everyone using everyone else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't even have a program or know the names? For that matter, what color jerseys are they wearing as they trot out on the field?" Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide, checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and then laid down with the moonlight on his cheekbones and on the frowning ridges in his brow, with the moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. One drop of rain, Clarice, another drop, Mildred, a third, the uncle, a fourth, the fire tonight, 1 Clarice, 2 Mildred, 3 uncle, 4 fire, 1 Mildred, 2 Clarice, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, sleeping tablets, men, disposable tissue, coattails, blow, wad, flush. Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, tablets, tissues, blow, wad, flush. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rain, the storm, the uncle laughing, thunder falling downstairs, the whole world pouring down, the fire gushing up in a volcano, all rushing on down around in a spouting roar and rivering stream toward morning. "I don't know anything anymore," he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue. At 9 in the morning, Mildred's bed was empty. Montag got up quickly, his heart pumping, and ran down the hall and stopped at the kitchen door. Toast popped out of the silver toaster, was seized by a spidery metal hand that drenched it with melted butter. Mildred watched the toast delivered to her plate. She had both ears plugged with electronic bees that were humming the hour away. She looked up suddenly, saw him, and nodded. "You all right?" he asked. She was an expert at lip reading from 10 years of apprenticeship at seashell ear thimbles. She nodded again. She set the toaster clicking away at another piece of bread. Montag sat down. His wife said, "I don't know why I should be so hungry. I'm hungry." "Last night," he began. "Didn't sleep well. Feel terrible," she said. "God, I'm hungry. I can't figure it." "Last night," he said again. She watched his lips casually. "What about last night?" "Don't you remember?" "What? Did we have a wild party or something? Feel like I've a hangover. God, I'm hungry." "Who was here?" "A few people," he said. "That's what I thought." She chewed her toast. "Sore stomach, but I'm hungry as all get out. Hope I didn't do anything foolish at the party." "No," he said quietly. The toaster spidered out a piece of buttered bread for him. He held it in his hand, feeling grateful. "You don't look so hot yourself," said his wife. In the late afternoon it rained, and the entire world was dark gray. He stood in the hall of his house, putting on his badge with the orange salamander burning across it. He stood looking up at the air conditioning vent in the hall for a long time. His wife was in the TV parlor, paused long enough from reading her script to glance up. "Hey," she said. "The man's thinking." "Yes," he said. "I wanted to talk to you." He paused. "You took all the pills in your bottle last night." "Oh, I wouldn't do that," she said, surprised. The bottle was empty. "I wouldn't do a thing like that." "Why would I do a thing like that?" she asked. "Maybe you took 2 pills and forgot, took 2 more and forgot again and took 2 more and were so dopey you kept right on until you had 30 or 40 of them in you." "Heck," she said. "What would I want to go and do a silly thing like that for?" "I don't know," he said. She was quite obviously waiting for him to go. "I didn't do that," she said. "Never in a million years." "All right, if you say so," he said. "That's what the lady said." She turned back to her script. "What's on this afternoon?" he asked tiredly. She didn't look up from her script again. "Well, this is a play. Comes on the wall-to-wall circuit in 10 minutes. They mailed me my part this morning. I sent in some box tops. They write the script with one part missing. It's a new idea. The homemaker, that's me, is the missing part. When it comes time for the missing lines, they all look at me out of the 3 walls and I say the lines. Here, for instance, the man says, 'What do you think of the whole idea, Helen?' And he looks at me sitting here center stage, see? And I say, she paused and ran her finger under a line in the script. 'I think that's fine.' And they go on with the play until he says, 'Do you agree to that, Helen?' And I say, 'I sure do.' Isn't that fun, Guy?" He stood in the hall looking at her. "It's sure fun," she said. "What's the play about?" "I just told you. There are these people named Bob and Ruth and Helen." "Oh, it's really fun. It'll be even more fun when we can afford to have the 4th wall installed. How long you figure before we save up and get the 4th wall torn out and a full 4th wall put in?" "It's only $2,000. That's 1/3 of my yearly pay." "It's only $2,000, she replied, "and I should think you consider me sometimes. If we had a 4th wall, why, I'd be just like this room wasn't ours at all, but all kinds of exotic people's rooms. We could do without a few things. We're already doing without a few things to pay for the 3rd wall. It was put in only 2 months ago, remember?" "Is that all it was?" She sat looking at him for a long moment. "Well, goodbye, dear." "Goodbye," he said. He stopped and turned around. "Does it have a happy ending?" "I haven't read that far." He walked over, read the last page, nodded, folded the script, and handed it back to her. He walked out of the house into the rain. The rain was thinning away, and the girl was walking in the center of the sidewalk with her head up and the few drops falling on her face. She smiled when she saw Montag. "Hello!" He said hello and then said, "What are you up to now?" "I'm still crazy. The rain feels good. I love to walk in it." "I don't think I'd like that," he said. "You might if you tried." "I never have." She licked her lips. "Rain even tastes good." What do you do? Go around trying everything once? He asked. Sometimes twice. She looked at something in her hand. What have you got there? He said. I guess it's the last of the dandelions this year. I didn't think I'd find one on the lawn this late. Have you ever heard of rubbing it under your chin? Look. He touched her chin with the flower, laughing. Why? If it rubs off, it means I'm in love. Has it? He could hardly do anything else but look. Well, she said, you're yellow under there. Fine, let's try you now. It won't work for me. Here. Before he could move, she had put the dandelion under his chin. He drew back and she laughed. Hold still. She peered under his chin and frowned. Well, he said. What a shame, she said. You're not in love with anyone. Yes, I am. It doesn't show. I am very much in love. He tried to conjure up a face to fit the words, but there was no face. I am. Oh, please don't look that way. It's that dandelion, he said. You've used it all up on yourself. That's why it won't work for me. Of course, that must be it. Oh, now I've upset you. I can see I have. I'm sorry, really I am. She touched his elbow. No, he said quickly. I'm all right. I've got to be going. So say you forgive me. I don't want you angry with me. I'm not angry. Upset, yes. I've got to go see my psychiatrist now. They make me go. I make up things to say. I don't know what he thinks of me. He says I'm a regular onion. I keep him busy peeling away the layers. I'm inclined to believe you need the psychiatrist, said Montague. You don't mean that. He took a breath and let it out and at last said, No, I don't mean that. The psychiatrist wants to know why I go out and hike around in the forest and watch the birds and collect butterflies. I'll show you my collection someday. Good. They want to know what I do with all my time. I tell them that sometimes I just sit and think, but I won't tell them what. I've got them running. And sometimes I tell them I like to put my head back like this and let the rain fall into my mouth. It tastes just like wine. Have you ever tried it? No, You have forgiven me, haven't you? Yes, he thought about it. Yes, I have. God knows why. You're peculiar. You're aggravating. Yet you're easy to forgive. You say you're 17? Well, next month. How odd. How strange. And my wife 30, and yet you seem so much older at times. I can't get over it. You're peculiar yourself, Mr. Montague. Sometimes I even forget you're a fireman. Now, may I make you angry again? Go ahead. How did it start? How did you get into it? How did you pick your work? And how did you happen to think to take the job you have? You're not like the others. I've seen a few, I know. When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon last night. The others would never do that. The others would walk off and leave me talking or threaten me. No one has time anymore for anyone else. You're one of the few who put up with me. That's why I think it's so strange you're a fireman. It just doesn't seem right for you somehow. He felt his body divide itself into a hotness and a coldness, a softness and a hardness, a trembling and a not trembling, the two halves grinding one upon the other. You'd better run on to your appointment, he said, and she ran off and left him standing there in the rain. Only after a long time did he move, and then slowly, as he walked, he tilted his head back in the rain, just a few moments, and opened. The mechanical hound slept but did not sleep, lived but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel back in the corner of the firehouse. The dim light of 1 in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky, framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and the copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on bits of ruby glass and on sensitive capillary hairs and the nylon brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, 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 its 8 legs spidered under it on rubber padded paws. Montague slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city, and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back to bend down and look at the hound. It was like a great bee come home from some field where the honey is full of poison, wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that over-rich nectar, and now it was sleeping the evil out of itself. Hello, whispered Montague, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. Nights when things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound and let loose rats in the firehouse areaway, and sometimes chicken and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyways. And there would be betting to see which the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later, the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught half across the areaway, gripped in gentling paws, while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down from the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game began. Montag stayed upstairs most nights when this went on. There had been a time years ago when he had bet with the best of them and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now at night he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to whoops of laughter below and the piano string scurry of rat feet, the violin squeaking of mice, and the great shadowing motioned silence of the hound leaping out like a moth in the raw light, finding, holding its victim, inserting the needle and going back to its kennel to die, as if a switch had been turned. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him with green-blue neon light flickering in its suddenly activated eyeballs. It growled again, a strange rasping combination of electrical sizzle, a frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. No, no, boy, said Montag, his heart pounding. He saw the silver needle extended upon the air an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from its kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, reacting, slid upward and took him through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off on a half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling, and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back down upon its 8 incredible insect legs and was humming to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass, by the drop hole. Behind him, 4 men at a card table under a green-lidded light in the corner glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last, curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. Montag? It doesn't like me, said Montag. What? The hound? The captain studied his cards. Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire, storage batteries, and electricity. Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination. So many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right? We all know that. All of those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It would be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory, a touch of amino acids perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now, reacted toward me. Hell, said the captain, irritated but not completely angry. Just enough memory set up in it by someone so it growled when I touched it. Who would do a thing like that? Asked the captain. You haven't any enemies here, Montag. None that I know of. Well, have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow. This isn't the first time it's threatened me, said Montag. Last month it happened twice. We'll fix it up, don't worry. But Montag did not move and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, then mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. I was just figuring, Montag. What does the hound think about down there nights? Is it coming alive on us, really? It makes me cold. It doesn't think anything. We don't want it to think. That's sad, said Montag quietly, because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame it is that that's all it can ever know. Beatty snorted gently. Hell, it's a fine piece of craftsmanship, a good rifle that can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time. That's why, said Montag, I wouldn't want to be its next victim. Why? You got a guilty conscience about something? Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes, while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and as many times he came out of the house and Clarice was there, somewhere in the world. Once he saw her shaking a walnut tree. Once he saw her sitting on the lawn knitting a blue sweater. 3 or 4 times he found a bouquet of late flowers on the porch, or a handful of chestnuts in a little sack, or some autumn leaves neatly pinned to a sheet of white paper and thumbtacked to his door. Every day Clarice walked him to the corner. One day it was raining, the next it was clear, the day after that the wind blew strong, and the day after that it was mild and calm, and the day after that calm day was a day like a furnace of summer, and Clarice with her face all sunburnt by late afternoon. Why is it, he said one time at the subway entrance, I feel I've known you so many years? Because I like you, she said, and I don't want anything from you, and because we know each other. You make me feel very old and very much like a father. Now you explain, she said, why you haven't any daughters like me if you love children so much. I don't know. You're joking. I mean, he stopped and shook his head. Well, my wife, she just never wanted any children at all. The girl stopped smiling. I'm sorry. I really thought you were having fun at my expense. I'm a fool. No, he said. It was a good question. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to ask. A good question. Let's talk about something else. Have you ever smelled old leaves? Don't they smell like cinnamon? Here, smell. Why, yes, it is like cinnamon in a way. She looked at him with her clear, blue, dark eyes. You always seem shocked. It's just I haven't had time. Did you look at the stretched out billboards like I told you? I think so, yes. He had to laugh. Your laugh sounds much nicer than it did. Does it? Much more relaxed. He felt at ease and comfortable. Why aren't you in school? I see you every day wandering around. Oh, they don't miss me, she said. I'm antisocial, they say. I don't mix. It's so strange. I'm very social indeed. It all depends on what you mean by social, doesn't it? Social to me means talking about things like this. She rattled some chestnuts that had fallen off the tree in the front yard. Or talking about how strange the world is. Being with people is nice, but I don't think it's social to get a bunch of people together and then not let them talk. Do you? An hour of TV class, an hour of basketball or baseball or running, another hour of transcription history or painting pictures, and more sports. But do you know, we never ask questions, or at least most don't. They just run the answers at you, bing, 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 and us sitting there for 4 more hours of film teacher. That's not social to me at all. It's a lot of funnels and a lot of water poured down the spout and out the bottom, and them telling us it's wine when it's not. They run us so ragged by the end of the day we can't do anything but go to bed or head for a fun park to bully people around, break window panes in the window smasher place, or wreck cars in the car wrecker place with the big steel ball. Or go out in the cars and race on the streets, trying to see how close you can get to lamp posts, playing chicken and knock hubcaps. I guess I'm everything they say I am, all right. I haven't any friends. That's supposed to prove I'm abnormal. But everyone I know is either shouting or dancing around like wild or beating up one another. Do you notice how people hurt each other nowadays? You sound so very old. Sometimes I'm ancient. I'm afraid of children my own age. They kill each other. Did it always used to be that way? My uncle says no. 6 of my friends have been shot in the last year alone. 10 of them died in car wrecks. I'm afraid of them, and they don't like me because I'm afraid. My uncle says his grandfather remembered when children didn't kill each other, but that was a long time ago when they had things different. They believed in responsibility, my uncle says. Do you know I'm responsible? I was spanked when I needed it years ago, and I do all the shopping and house cleaning by hand. But most of all, she said, I like to watch people. Sometimes I ride the subway all day and look at them and listen to them. I just want to figure out who they are and what they want and where they're going. Sometimes I even go to the fun parks and ride in the jet cars when they race on the edge of town at midnight. And the police don't care as long as they're insured. As long as everyone has 10,000 insurance, everyone's happy. Sometimes I sneak around and listen in subways, or I listen at soda fountains. And do you know what? What? People don't talk about anything. Oh, they must. No, not anything. They name a lot of cars or clothes or swimming pools mostly and say how swell, but they all say the same things. And nobody says anything different from anyone else. And most of the time in the cafes, they have the joke boxes on and the same jokes most of the time, or the musical wall lit and all the colored patterns running up and down. But it's only color and all abstract. And at the museums, have you ever been? All abstract. That's all there is. Now, Uncle says it was different once, a long time back. Sometimes pictures said things or even showed people. Your uncle said, your uncle said, your uncle must be a remarkable man. He is. He certainly is. Well, I've got to be going. Goodbye, Mr. Montag. Goodbye. Goodbye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. The firehouse. Montag, you shin that pole like a bird up a tree. 3rd day. Montag, I see you came in the back door this time. The hound bother you? No, no. 4th day. Montag, a funny thing, heard tell this morning. Fireman Seattle purposely set a mechanical hound to his own chemical complex and let it loose. What kind of suicide would you call that? 5, 6, 7 days. And then Clarice was gone. He didn't know what there was about the afternoon, but it was not seeing her somewhere in the world. The lawn was empty, the trees empty, the street empty, and while at first he did not even know he missed her or was even looking for her, the fact was that by the time he reached the subway, there were vague stirrings of unease in him. Something was the matter. His routine had been disturbed. A simple routine, true, established in a short few days, and yet he almost turned back to make the walk again, to give her time to appear. He was certain if he tried the same route, everything would work out fine. But it was late, and the arrival of his train put a stop to his plan.